ways that we find ourselves fishing these days on wide variety of venues is obviously with a feeder, but we're fishing on lines sometimes that are much more associated with pole fishing and not feeder fishing. Venues that are commercials, it's widely known that certainly later on in the later stages of a match, fish quite often come in. You know, they can come onto a 6 metre line, for example, with 2 hours to go, that sort of thing, and sometimes the last hour you might find out there are fish down the margins. When you're fishing a lot of feeder matches like I do, and there's certain qualifiers and that sort of thing, they're big prestigious matches, and these are areas we really can't afford to ignore. Now, obviously, we're feeder fishing, so we have to have a crossover where we can tattle those areas, but with a feeder. One of the issues why I know some people don't tattle these areas is just purely because of the casting and the technique involved. There are times when underarming a feeder in can be certainly more advantageous than casting overhead. On these lines, when you're fishing, for example, if you were fishing, I mean, we've got some features here that's a little bit too wide where I am today, but if you were fishing a snake lake, for example, that was 12 or 14 metres wide, then you might find that it's not the right distance for you to cast overhead. You might not have a rod that's quite short enough to do that, because obviously, you know, the rod might be too long. An 11-foot rod, for example, might be too long to cast 12 or 14 metres overhead comfortably. So that's when underarming can come into play. You'll be surprised how far out you can actually underarm a feeder. I mean, I'm not obviously going to underarm this to the far bank today, but I can show you simply. A lot of people don't do it because they're uncomfortable with underarming the feeder in. Now you can simply do it sitting down, which is dead easy. All I do is I've got the feeder, I mean this is a method feeder, I've got it in my left hand. All I do is open the bail arm so that I'm holding the line like that with my hand, and all I do is just simply, nice and smoothly, just by raising the rod up and letting go of the feeder, that will automatically, like a pendulum, just swing out into the lake. So when it reaches where you want it to go, just simply stop the line. You can just feather it. So all you need, it's a really simple process. Takes a little bit of practice sometimes, but you've just got to be nice and smooth with it. Just release your feeder and raise the rod as it goes, and when it reaches its peak, when it's out as far as it will go, just let go of the line, and that will let the feeder drop where you want it to drop. So you just let the feeder go out, nice and simple. That's at, I don't know, 6 or 7 metres, and I'm there fishing. And you can do that all the time. The beauty about fishing like that is it's amazing when you get into a rhythm of doing it. It's amazing how accurate you can be in doing it, and the advantage of that is that when you're fishing close like that, as you can imagine, certainly with a method feeder, the bites can be pretty vicious. You know, you're fishing for big fish, they're self-hooking against the method feeder, and the rod can literally go in. The beauty about fishing like this, you can be so accurate with it and not using a line clip. So that means when you do put the rod down on that line, you can undo the drag if you wish, so that if you do get any of those vicious bites, the fish can just run out of your peg and you're still in contact with it. You're not having to fumble for a line clip. So that's one way that you can do it. That is the same technique that you can use down the margin if you're going to go down a margin as well. Obviously, just face whichever way you're going, and it's exactly the same process. But if you want to do it a little bit further out, and this is something that a lot of people don't tend to really do, but it's amazing how far out you can actually underarm a feeder. So if you are wanting to go up to another, like a far bank, like on a snake lake, and the other scenario is if you've got any overhanging trees, an overhead cast is obviously sending the feeder out at a different trajectory, so it's going up and over, and that would actually take you into the tree. By underarming the feeder, sometimes if you get it right, you can underarm the feeder so it's going to go underneath the branches and underneath the features and land closer to where you want to be. So all I can do with this, it's the same technique, but just stand up to do it. And it's surprising how far out you can do it. And sometimes the feeder goes in really, really nicely. It goes in better than it will do if you cast it overhead. So all I'm going to do again, the same process, but stand up. That's the only difference. And that's going to give you a bigger pendulum and allow you to do it further out. So same process, feeder in my left hand, rod in my right, raise the rod up, let the feeder go, and just swing it out. Nice and simple. And when you do that 3, 4, 5 times in a session, you'll be able to drop that on the same spot every time, just by keeping that nice smooth process. And by doing that, it means you don't have to fish with a line clip, which is going to benefit you if you hook any of those violent fish. It's just a way of tackling those areas that we know are so important when we're fishing a pole. It means we're tackling those key areas, but it's allowing you to do it with a feeder.